Hello and welcome to the Leisure Room. This is the third episode in our Racing Awareness series. I am your host, Hannes.
And I'm Celeste.
All right. This is the February March update. And as you can see, we have two medals on the wall. And it is also 6 months since Ellery's birth slash passing. I think it's time for an update on how are we feeling. 6 months is quite a milestone. So, how have you been, mommy?
Yeah, 6 months is quite a milestone. I think the anticipation of her 6 months was worse than the actual 6 months itself.
The idea of let's celebrate the 6 months,
Yeah,
basically.
and just the milestones she would have been at.
Right.
But also, on her actual 6 months, we had a lot of other things going on.
We did. Yes. So, I got into an accident. Your brother got into an accident. So, that was life throwing more things at us on top of our grief. And we went to Phoenix to see our beloved friends. And they have, what is it now? 9-week-old, 10-week-old?
Yeah.
Something around that. So I think that also kind of played in, at least for me, in the grief aspect of things. I was very happy for them, and I was very happy to see Liam and be around him and stuff. Never really had a tough moment, but there is that click in your brain. It's like, I'm truly happy for our friends, and I also feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah.
And both can happen at the same time.
Yes, that is true.
And you're not putting up a mask necessarily, because I'm truly happy, but also, yeah.
I don't think I struggled there with their little one in terms of it playing a role in my grief. I think I was really just in the moment of hanging out with their little guy and getting to cuddle with him and stuff.
Yeah, really beautiful to see you.
Mhm.
So, tough. That is the sum up, I believe, together with the winter depression, I think.
I think what has been harder around this period is seeing babies around Ellery's age during my work days.
Because it makes you wonder.
Yeah, because I see these babies that are 6 months old, the age Ellery should have been, and I see how big they are and what they're doing, smiling or laughing, and just the things that they're doing in the office. And it's a reminder of like what I'm missing.
Right. And it's a silent, lonely reminder. Because even though your colleagues know, they're obviously not always on alert, like, oh, Celeste obviously has a tough time right now. Not everybody thinks that way. They're living in their own world, respectfully, which sometimes makes it more tough.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you want to talk about what you're feeling, obviously, but not everybody either wants to hear it or not every person is the right person to talk to about it. It is tough. It's yeah, so much different than general grief, meaning missing a person that has lived a certain amount of years. This is a whole different.
Yeah. And it's also like the realization that this doesn't end. It's going to be, now it's 6 months. Next is a year, 2 years, 3, 4. So it's like there's always going to be moments in life when you wonder.
True. I do wonder as well if there is a second kid, how that will help or how that will play out. Because our guest from today, she has kids after her stillborn, and so that will be a good conversation to have. A few good questions to ask, like how is it different? How is the evolution in your grief and that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
So that will be interesting to hear. What are you trying to do, madam?
Lily. I also think we are hitting a stage in a sense where you were saying that, you know, people don't always realize or want to talk about it or ask about it. I think that's been from the beginning. People are hesitant to talk about it, which made it very isolating in the beginning. I'm very thankful for the people who did come to me and say something about it, talk about it. But now it feels even more so because we're getting to a point where I feel like the farther we get away from this, the more we're settling back into our life and the more the people around us are also just forgetting, feels like.
It is a natural flow of life that we cannot expect other people to swim against, if you want to use that word. But I do feel what you're saying, because even for me at work, it's tough some days, and I can tell that I guess my managers are like, still, don't bring it up. Or, oh yeah, that's right, that happened. It makes it even more difficult because some days I'm excellent and I'm having a good drive at work, and then other days I'm like on specific moments, like her birthday or birth number, the 15th. So yeah, it's tough to speak up and to tell your emotions, and some people are just annoyed by it after a while.
But it's like if Ellery were here, we would be talking about her
Yeah,
and sharing stories about her. But it's just because she's not here that I feel like it's a lot harder for people to even want to hear us talk about it because it is the same thing. It's not sharing new memories or new stories,
yep.
but it's our way of keeping her with us in our hearts. I also just feel like overall, I'm not doing well.
Which is okay. I can only admire for you speaking up like you do. And I obviously know, and I can see it because I'm your husband. But I believe from the position as husband, the only thing I can I guess do is not the right word, but the only thing I can do is allow you to, and support you in the way that you like to be supported. And whatever my opinions are, doesn't matter, because you're feeling the way you're feeling, and you're dealing with it the way you're dealing with it. And I can only like like tell other people to do the same. Because some days there are thoughts like, still, it's been 6 months, but then it's like, it's only been 6 months. And the next 3 months it will be better, and then the wave will hit you again, and that's the whole point. It's a wave that goes up and down.
Sure is.
It sure is, and it is for me, and it is for you, and the waves are not synchronized to an extent, luckily,
Yeah.
because in moments that you can support me, then I can support you. But I guess that's the advice I would give parents as well. It's like, allow the other person to feel the way, support them if you can, because you're also dealing with your emotions. Don't push yours away. It would be better to have a tough night together, I would think. But obviously, everybody deals with it differently, and whatever your relationship dynamic is, find a way to make it work on a mutual level.
Hmm.
That's my advice.
We're both really respectful.
I mean, that's the least you should do.
Yeah.
Is be respectful towards each other.
Yeah.
And if you, I could say, I guess, if you need to yell, then go outside. If you need to run, then go run. If you need to take the weighted elephant that was made for us, then go do so in the room, and have your emotional moment.
Yeah. We have this elephant that was made. My mom gifted it to us for Christmas, and it's her length Ellery's length, 21 inches, and it's also her weight, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. And it's made from clothing that my mom had bought for her that had little elephants on it. An elephant's like her little spirit animal. So that's why it was an elephant. But yeah, sometimes I'll just,
We'll bring it next time.
yeah, we'll bring it next time. Sometimes I'll just, it'll either lay in bed next to me or I'll bring it. Like right now, it's downstairs in the living room on the couch. Sometimes I'll just bring it down just to
You know what?
have
I'll
it
go get
there.
it.
There she is. She's missing a bow
She's missing a bow already?
off her ear. It fell off.
There we go. The weighted elephant. You can tell it's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And has like name and stuff. And so yeah, it's somebody from North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's someone from Fuquay. I should ask my mom, but yeah, somebody here locally who makes these.
Yep.
Which I think is so awesome.
Awesome, indeed. So yeah, that's the elephant.
A lot of waves of grief. And I feel like initially it was a lot, at least for me, a lot of up and down. But I think honestly, since before Christmas, I've just been, for the most part, in this like down.
I'm telling you, the winter depression.
Yeah.
The cold days, the long nights, lack of sunlight, and quite some milestones as well. Christmas is a big one. 6 months now is a big one.
And I have a hard time focusing on the good that comes from it. Even with this that we're doing and the marathons and the awareness, it's really hard to find the positive energy and drive right now to put into it
Yep.
because I feel like even when I'm doing things for MTP or the podcast or the next marathon, in my head, what's at the forefront is that I don't want to be doing any of this because I want Ellery here.
Right? You want to be a mom. You don't want to be a non-profit executive. Not that we're executives, but
Yeah, and even Easter is coming up. And the other day I was out at the store with my sister and I'm seeing the Easter stuff and I'm like, dang, I was looking forward to doing like a huge Easter egg hunt with not necessarily this year, but just future is just like huge Easter egg hunts for our community of friends, neighbors, and all their kids, and the babies, the toddlers, the older kids. Again, not saying that that was something that we were going to do this year. Probably not, but in my head, seeing all that stuff, it was again just somehow a reminder of like, it's not coming anytime soon. So I think it's all these things around me that I'm seeing or hearing is just,
triggering.
it's very triggering lately. Whereas it wasn't before. Even walking through the store the other day, we were in Target
I mean, it's a trigger.
and there was a baby, and it's been months since I have looked at a stroller and been bothered by it or triggered by it.
Right.
And I saw it and I was just like, dang it, that should be us right now with our stroller.
I totally agree. I think I have a different take on this stuff because from the, I guess, beginning, from the early stages, I've set a mindset for myself like all of this is gonna come, and I'm gonna have the same feelings. It's very much rationalizing the whole thing in the sense that obviously I don't know this person and she might have had a miscarriage or a stillbirth before, but I give them benefit of the doubt that they never experienced this and they never have to, and it's some kind of a burden that I have taken onto myself so other people don't have to. It's like, okay, we experienced this, you have no clue what you haven't experienced. At least be happy with what you have from my perspective, because I can't tell other people what to do. But yeah, That's how I take it, how I process it, which is still tough. It's still tough in the end.
There's no one out there who will understand unless they have experienced a stillbirth themselves.
Yeah, and there, I would even add to this because I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, "Yeah, we experienced the same thing. We had a miscarriage, and the baby was, I don't know, could hold it in his hand, so you could definitely see something." And not to diminish what he experienced, but there is a difference. There is a difference between 14 ounces and 7 pounds. And if that's the kind of connection you're trying to seek, like, oh, I experienced the same. Yeah, they were 14 ounces. Like, it's almost insulting.
Yeah, that is hard. Again, not to diminish somebody who has a miscarriage is also very hard.
It is.
We had a miscarriage before Ellery. It's awful. But this for us just feels so different. And yeah, even hearing that story when you told me, it hurts kind of because I don't feel like they do understand when that's the story that they share.
You could even you could drag a little further, meaning, let's say you delivered Ellery, and 2 days after she had SIDS, or 2 days after, or 3 days, whatever, they wouldn't put it in the same category anymore because she had lived. So at that point, it's not a miscarriage anymore. But the difference is only 1 or 2 days, or maybe a week, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's where the differences lie, I feel like. Regardless, everybody that loses a fetus, it's a horrible thing. Nobody should have to go through it.
It's also hard though when so people who try to connect and maybe just don't, like in this case. Or it's also hard when people just flat out ignore it.
Yeah.
Because we had that happen
We had
recently.
that happen last week too.
Yeah. We were getting our taxes done, and of course, is a question that comes up if you have children, and we're still navigating how to answer that question. But I think you
I
said
said,
not with us.
with us anymore, not alive.
Yeah, not living. I don't know. But she just glossed right over it, and she's like, "Okay." And then we circled back to it later, and she said, "You made this comment," but it was her follow-up to it was just another for question for tax purposes, and never once did she say, "Oh, I'm sorry," like, nothing, and a part of me wanted to be like, Look at my phone right now. Look at this baby that we lost. It's not just a pregnancy loss, like, look at her. She was fully formed.
Yeah.
Like, look at all her features."
Now, we did learn that some states do provide tax incentives if we have a stillbirth.
Yes, not North Carolina.
It's only a few states.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should go ahead and move on towards the marathon updates.
Yep. Or how not to run a marathon. Well, don't crash a car, I would say. Or do crash a car if you don't want to run a marathon. But that's not my intention. I'm still stressing about the accident itself. So, yeah, backtracking even a couple days before then. So, we were leaving on Wednesday. On Monday, you got a call. Well, and I do too from you, but you got a call first that your beloved brother was in a accident,
Yeah.
and he crashed his motorcycle. And as we all know, motorcycle accidents are a little bit more severe.
It really is a miracle that he's even alive.
Yeah.
He has multiple injuries, as you may imagine, including permanent conditions as well. He is still in the ICU in Texas, but he's fighting. He's definitely a fighter.
Yeah.
And so when I got that call Monday, initially I didn't know the full extent of injuries and what happened. So it's really a panic of trying to figure out like what are we doing? What's happening?
I feel very powerless.
Yeah, and that day I just felt like I was sitting around kind of waiting for news and updates. My mom was on her way back from Ohio too, so she also wasn't here, and I'm trying to get updates through my sister, who's trying to get updates through my mom, who's trying to get updates through my dad, and so it's just a really bad telephone line,
Mhm.
and ultimately, we decided we were still going to Phoenix on Wednesday as planned because we had the flights booked, and since my brother was in Texas, Wednesday morning, we flew direct to Phoenix, and then I went straight to Texas.
Yeah.
Whereas you stayed in Phoenix.
I stayed in Phoenix. I worked remote, spent time with our friends, and Friday I was on my way to pick up my bib, and then the car in front of me decided to stand still on the highway. And so I luckily only have or had a, a mild concussion and a burn wound from the airbags, which is healing quite nicely. So I still picked up my bib, thinking I, I at least want that stuff, just as a reminder, because I could sense the concussion setting in once I left the scene, you could say. I was like, oh, okay, crowds are tough, and so I didn't run the day after. We did go to the event to pick up the medal.
Yes.
Paid for that one. I was like, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it, and I will make up for it one way or another. And so that was tough.
Yeah, you struggled
Because
that day.
I struggled in three ways. Because one, I don't like giving up. If I pay for something and if I train for something, I'm gonna do it. And so that was the last straw. The accident was the last straw that made me decide, okay, maybe something doesn't want me to run.
Yeah. And we luckily our friends were in Arizona, and so our friend's mom came and picked you up after the accident because I still was not back in Phoenix. I was flying back that night, but I wasn't going to be back till after midnight. And so she was there to pick you up and also just to talk to you about to mother you a little bit.
Talk some sense into me.
Yeah.
So yeah, didn't run, picked up the medal, and then let my brain heal a little bit.
When we also went to the race day, we did get to wear our t-shirts that day.
Our MTP t-shirt.
Yes, so MTP created t-shirts for us for the Ellery campaign, and I love them. You have a race one, an athletic wear one that you can wear. And we decided when we went to pick up your medal that we would wear our shirts that day. And afterward, we made a stop at Costco, and we were walking around Costco wearing these shirts, and this lady came up behind me and she said, "Excuse me, do you do ultrasounds?" And honestly, I was just kind of in a daze with just life and everything on my mind between your accident and my brother's and just everything else in life. And so she asked that. I don't even think I answered her. I think I just looked at her and she's like, "Because that's one thing that we do is measure placentas during ultrasounds." And I'm also, like, in this shock state, like
What is this stranger talking to me about placentas?
yeah, and she said that, and I'm like, "Oh, really?" Like, just shocked, like, "What? You teach measuring the placenta during the ultrasound?" But yeah, she was, and I wish that my brain had been turned on a little bit more and more in tune because I would have had so many things to ask her. But ultimately, what I learned was she was an ultrasound technician and she taught students, and in their teaching they taught placental measurements, and that's so cool. And I wish I would have asked her like where and why and how and all that, but again my mind wasn't fully thinking. I did tell her a little bit about what we were doing in that moment, and before she walked off, she was like, "Well, thank you so much." She's like, "For what you're doing, and you just made my day." I don't know how, but awesome. But I was like, she made my day by just saying that that's something that they teach.
Right? Because that's what we've been trying to get after.
Yeah, and I wish I could go back and find her, but
Yep. But then we have to go all the way back to Phoenix. So, and so, yeah, I feel better now. And we decided to go to Texas that Monday instead of staying another week in Arizona. And so we spent a week in Texas, which was also nice.
Yeah.
Different scenery, being closer to your brother.
Yeah, it was nice just to be able to be there for support for him and also my mom, because my mom is there supporting him, and
Yeah.
it kind of alleviated some of the burden of her having to always be there with him, where her and I would kind of take turns. And yeah, just being able to spend time with him while we could. We had the week off, so
You had. I was working.
yeah, I had the week off. You were working remote, but the thought was, yeah, we were kind of initially like, do we stay in Arizona? Do we go back? But there was just no way we were going to stay in Arizona and like have a clear head and be able to move forward with the outreach to the clinics. So we went to Texas.
And then we came back that Saturday. And that's kind of when we decided next week we're gonna make up. So there was just the two of us cycling the distance of the marathon.
Yes.
And I cycled because I had a little bit of a foot injury during one of my training sessions. Since I wasn't officially doing a full marathon running, I was like, okay, let's cycle.
I think it worked out better too because we got to do it together.
Yes, which was nice.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'd have just been running by yourself and there's no big event or other people running with you, which is lonely. So
Yeah,
made it a little date.
and don't underestimate the physical impact on your body running that distance. But we cycled and that was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
It took us only 2 hours and a little bit, and which is insane to know because the fastest people that run marathons also do it in that time.
It's crazy. I had an electric bike too.
Yes, that is a crazy feat, those guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, around Raleigh, around the what is it, Walnut Creek Greenway Trail, we only had to cross the road 3 times. I think everything else was bridges and nature and
So beautiful.
beautiful, a lovely hot 70-degree.
Oh, perfect. Perfect weather.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I rented an electric bike to cycle with you, which was a great idea because you are a fast runner and I will cycle with you when you run and can't keep up sometimes. And so when you're on a bike, you're even faster.
I have a race bike too, so that doesn't help.
Yes. So having that electric bike took away the like stress of me having to keep up with you.
We could actually have conversations
Yeah, we could ride next to each other.
at 15 miles an hour. So yeah, that was fun. And yeah, now we're getting ready for the next one. The next marathon will be in Asheville, North Carolina, our home state, on the 21st of March. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be extremely hilly, and I might struggle with that.
Yeah, I saw that. I was looking up the marathon where it was at the other day. It's like 1,000 up, 1,000 down.
A distance down as well.
I do think your net is negative.
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
well,
So
I mean, 1,000 feet. That's only 300 meters. That's not too bad. That's actually not too bad.
no, it just seems like a lot.
No, that's. I will feel it, but it could be worse.
It could be worse, yes.
But so yeah, we're gonna go on Thursday and help with the event package.
We're going to help fill the runners' bags with whatever they fill it with, but our flyer will be in there too.
Yes.
And so the marathon people were amazing enough to waive the fee that they normally take to be able to include something like if you have a business in the bags in exchange for us helping them fill it. We could put our own flyer in there. So we've got our race marathon flyer on one side and then MTP information on the other side. We've got this printed and yeah, excited about that.
Right. Yep. Me too. All that leaves me now is training, training, training.
Yeah, how do you feel about your training?
A little nervous because the last marathon that I ran was the end of January, and I was supposed to run a second one 3 weeks after. So, in terms of what do you do in those 3 weeks, there's not much you can do because you have to recover from the one you just ran, and then technically you have to taper down for the one you're gonna run, and those timelines overlap a lot. So, I didn't run much during those 3 weeks, which means I haven't been running much for 5 weeks now because I was also recovering from the head injury. And so it's 3 weeks now until the marathon. So I think I will just build up until the marathon again, just because I cannot taper down any more than I already am. So yeah, so my training, a little nervous. I ran 6 miles the other day, which were decent 6 miles. So I still have it in me. It's just those long distances that's where the training really starts.
Yeah.
So
You can do it.
it's a pain. I can do it. Just put myself through it. Maybe not in 4 hours. Maybe a little slower, but the idea is that I finish.
Exactly. Injury free, ideally.
Injury free, yeah, for the whole year. I think it's now time to introduce our new guest.
Yes, I'm very excited about this one.
Today's guest is Samantha Banerjee. She is the mom of Alana, born still in 2013, 2 days before her due date, after a uncomplicated pregnancy. Samantha is the executive director of Push for Empowered Pregnancy, or PUSH for short. This is a non-profit organization founded in 2021 by bereaved parents that are channeling their grief to bring positive change in the world of preventable stillbirth. PUSH is taking big, bold action on a national scale to bring families and babies home safe together. Their mission is to eradicate preventable stillbirth in the US by 2035. And they're doing so through education, advocacy, community. This is a non-profit organization founded in 2021 by bereaved parents that are channeling their grief to bring positive change in the world of preventable stillbirth. We welcome Samantha Banerjee.
Woo! Nice. Good job.
Sam, thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast. We're truly excited to be here with you and get to talk to you.
I'm excited to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just jump right in by first talking about your story of your first pregnancy with Alana and how the pregnancy looked and the days leading up to her stillbirth.
So Alana, my daughter Alana's my first pregnancy. It was in 2013, and it was a perfect pregnancy. The entire time, we were told everything was textbook. I was healthy, low risk. I had an easy pregnancy. I was like just blissfully happy. She's actually the first grandchild on both sides of our family. We had just gotten married a year earlier. And this was just a very deeply anticipated and loved baby all around. And it was literally 2 days before my due dates, and I went into labor, and we, walked into the hospital thinking we were finally bringing home our baby girl, only to be told she no longer had a heartbeat. And we had no idea this could happen to anyone in this day and age, let alone to us. And I was shocked when I left the hospital and learned that this stillbirth, this word I hadn't even heard through the entire pregnancy, even through delivering my stillborn daughter, such a stigma against this issue that I didn't even hear the word until I got home, Googled the cause of death on her death certificate, which was intrauterine fetal demise, which, as you guys know, just means that she's dead. So that's a completely useless cause of death. And that's the first time the word stillbirth popped up in 9 months of pregnancy, despite reading every book, blog, website I can get my hands on, taking a 10-week birthing course. Like I honestly thought I knew everything there was to know about pregnancy until I walked into the hospital and found out that I knew nothing. Almost 1% of US pregnancies, 65 times a day for decades. And not just in high-risk pregnancies, not just in families who don't have access to care or are facing, you know, other complications, like whether it's drug use or you know, underlying maternal health issues. Like this is happening in healthy low risk pregnancies. In fact, I believe it's the stat is 81% of moms who go on to have a stillbirth have no known maternal risk factors at the start of the pregnancy. So this literally can and does happen to anyone, and I'm kind of the poster child for that.
81%.
Wow.
That is so high.
Yeah, it is. They really don't, I don't know, at least for me, they really don't talk to you about any complications that could happen throughout the pregnancy. They tell you what to watch out for, like, hey, go to the ER if you experience this or that, but they never say why or what complications that could indicate. I am a PA, so like medically, I know why they're asking me certain questions. They're looking for, you know, fetal distress or like signs of preeclampsia, but if I had not been medical, I would have never known what they were asking those questions for and what complications they were trying to assess.
Yeah, exactly.
Even then, I had never thought about stillbirth as an outcome, really. And I had seen it. I'd been there for stillbirths as a student. I've seen it happen, and still for my own pregnancy, I thought, no, you don't think about it.
Quickly playing devil's advocate. During a pregnancy, I think there are just too many risk factors or too many causes, and the way they're not telling you everything is because one of it's just too many, and you would worry the crap out of you, if I can use that word. So maybe that might be one of the reasons.
Well, if you talk to providers, I mean, that's exactly what they'll tell you is, you know, why are we going to worry moms and pregnant people about risks that there's nothing they can do about? You know, there's nothing that, like many, the prevailing view still to this day amongst medical professionals, what they've been trained is that stillbirth is not preventable. It's just one of those things that happens, and it's sad and it's terrible, but you know, there's nothing you can do about it. But we now have the data to show that that is absolutely not true. And so this paternalistic view still pervades the culture, and really what it is disempowering, because it's not like we're afraid to scare pregnant women, right? Like we tell them you're not allowed to eat a list of 40 things, right? Because of this extremely tiny risk of listeria. There's a whole host of things that we're telling people about. For some reason, we're not telling them about the most like the most common risks that are going to happen. I mean, stillbirth is literally claiming more children's lives in the US up to age 14 than prematurity, SIDS, car accidents, drowning, guns, fire, poison, flu, and listeria combined. And those are all things, right, that we tell parents about in advance, even though they're scary, because if you don't know that they're there, how are you supposed to protect your child against it, right? And not every one of these tragedies will ever be preventable. Just the same way, sometimes car accidents, drowning, but there are things you can do to lower your risk. The difference is that when it comes to stillbirth, we are not giving parents that chance. And so for me and for, you know, the other founders of Push, you know, we came together because we are just so sick of hearing the same story over and over again. And, you know, for many of us, it's been 5 years, 10 years, 20 years that we just keep hearing the same story. And then all of us parents are finding out only after the fact all the things that we and our providers could have done differently that might have given us a different outcome. Sometimes accidents happen, and they happen quickly, especially in obstetrics. There are warning signs that are being missed because we're simply not educating parents. When parents do bring it up, there is no standardized protocols for how medical professionals are supposed to respond and investigate these things. And so often it just is it's a roll of the dice, and who happens to pick up the phone when you call with a concern, and whether they're going to tell you to go lay down and drink some juice, or they're going to tell you, come in and let's get you checked out. And then when 99% of the time, thankfully, it is fine, so many of us are shamed for speaking up. We're like, oh, you're just, first time mom, like, you don't have to be so anxious. And then people are discouraged from speaking up again. And sometimes stillbirth is a perfect storm type issue. Like, it's very rarely like a one very obvious cause uh of what's happening. And at least, even when there is something like a small placenta, for example, our medical system is not looking at these things. And so the standard protocol is not going to catch it the first time you speak up in many cases. So I later learned that in Alana's case, she actually died of fetal maternal hemorrhage. So what was happening is that she had a short hypocoiled, meaning there's not enough of the protective coiling umbilical cord, and thin. And so it was very prone to compression. And what we were able to see on her placenta slides after the fact, and I didn't, find this out until 6.5 years later, was that she was having repeated episodes, like hundreds of episodes of cord compression, where her cord would get compressed, and it was like somebody was standing on a garden hose, and the pressure would build, and then it would burst out. And she was actually bleeding out into her placenta over the last 2 weeks of her life. And so, but this was an intermittent thing, right? Like, so I had multiple non-stress tests just because my OB was like, extra cautious about that kind of thing. And she passed every single one with flying colors. And, like, I noticed changes in her movement, and I brought it up. But, as far as my conversations about fetal movement with my doctor and my nurses ever gone, is baby moving? Yes, I feel like she's moving a little, maybe like less. Oh, that's normal. She's just running out of room. No, again, like you said, no explanation of why this is important, about what to be looking for, about, understanding that every baby is different. That baby slowing down at the end of the pregnancy is a myth. It's critically important for you to know your normal and your baby's normal, and to speak up immediately if there's any change. These were all things, this is all context, right? That I'm missing. Like, there's a fetal factor, maternal factor, and a environmental factor. And it's when these all kind of combine to create that perfect storm that you have a bad outcome. And so in my case, it was that, Alana had this, structurally deficient cord, which again could have been seen on an ultrasound, but nobody's looking for that kind of thing. Environmentally, I'm laying on my back a lot, which has been shown for some babies, to be just harder to tolerate. There's so many factors that go into it, right? And so the point of where I'm getting at this is that it's very rare that you have an obvious, like, oh, this is what's going on. And if you do, you're at the point where, like, your baby is in distress and, like, you need to be delivered imminently. And so, like, yes, if that's the case, they will catch that if you are told to come in time. But for a lot of us, it's just not the way it works. And so it's really easy for these cases to fall through the cracks, because it's just not something that our medical system is prioritizing looking for, especially not in a healthy, low-risk pregnancy. And for me, like, that was infuriating. When I went through my next pregnancies with my son and my second daughter, the level of care that I received was worlds away from when I got in my first, because all of a sudden now I'm considered a high-risk pregnancy, and I'm getting, monitoring every couple of weeks, and I'm getting growth scans throughout. Again, they were perfectly healthy, normal pregnancies. Everything was fine. They were miserable. That was different. But everyone's like, oh, everything's fine, everything looks great. And you're like, oh, well, you would have said that last time too. So it's really hard to internalize any sense of safety or confidence. But yeah, like, even though that was the case for them, for Kieran and Mia, they got tons of care. And all I could think was, why did I have to pay for this with my child's life? Like, that's not right. You shouldn't have to lose a baby to get the best level of care. And even so, even having lost a baby, you know, and even having, you know, extremely good private insurance, like my MFM spent hours on the phone fighting for me to be able to get growth scans covered, you know, like basic stuff. And it's like, why are we making this so difficult? Other countries, they just literally go in and they get an ultrasound every 2 weeks the entire pregnancy. And it's like, that's just normal. It's very interesting because the way our pregnancy standards are set up systemically, and this is not an indictment on doctors at all, because OBs themselves get into this work because they care. I was at the ACOG conference last spring with Anne and Alicia and Amanda from Measure the Placenta, and I was brought to tears several times sitting in these sessions, just listening to OBs talk about how hard they are fighting to keep their patients safe, and like the hoops that they're jumping through and the working conditions that they are dealing with. And it's because they care and they want to see us and they want to see our babies get through pregnancy safely. But the system that they are operating within is not set up for that. The incentives are backwards, and there's no accountability when there is a poor outcome. Our standard of care in the US is being held artificially low because it provides liability cover for OBs and insurance companies. And so, like, when you have a loss, even in, you know, a case like mine or like your guys, where it's pretty obvious afterwards, right, that there were things that could have been done differently that might have given a different outcome. If you tried to, you know, bring that to court, any, you know, doctor would say is, well, your doctor was following the standard of care, even though they're coming in with the best of intentions, and they are doing everything that they're told they need to do to keep their patients safe. They don't know that it's not the same elsewhere, and that what they're being told to do is like literally the bare minimum. And the problem is that until, even once they learn this, you know, often the hard way through one of our cases, until all OBs begin practicing the same way, they put themselves at risk by doing anything differently, even if they're trying to intervene and save a child's life. And unfortunately, you know, OBs are very, very likely to be sued. And this is something that's ingrained with them in from medical school. Like, you know, they pay the highest malpractice insurance out of any medical specialty. They're the second most likely to be sued after general surgeons. And like for many of them, it's kind of like this, it's only a matter of time. You know, stillbirth is happening less than 1% of pregnancies, right? So 99 times out of 100, if you just roll the dice, you know, you have a mom's, you know, at let's say 30 something weeks saying, I feel like something's off, you know, my baby's not moving as much, or I just feel weird. You have her come in and she does the NST and they, you know, do the BBP, and let's say everything looks fine, right? But the mom is saying, I still don't feel reassured, like something's is off. You know, the reality is that even if the doctor does nothing, 99 times out of 100, that baby's going to be fine. If they do intervene, let's say, you know, they decide to, maybe you have like low fluid or something, and they're like, well, I guess that's can be enough of an indication that let's, you know, deliver early. And then, you know, this baby survives, but ends up in the NICU or has developmental delays. Even though the doctor was acting with the best of intentions, and from our point of view as parents, you know, may very well have saved that child's life, and is what we as parents would choose, right? I've had people say to me things like, oh, but that was you know, must have been a very sick baby, or like, this is the second worst outcome. It would have been worse if, you know, a baby survived and they had issues. I'm just like, that's not your choice to make for me as a parent. Like, I would have gladly taken my daughter in any form. Unfortunately, that's the view of the system, because that doctor who intervened to save that child's life can now be sued by the insurance companies for millions of dollars for the, you know, NICU stay that was resulting. And if the baby dies, there's no recourse. I mean, in most states, the only thing that a parent can sue for is emotional damages to the mother. In most states, you can't even find a lawyer that will take the case, even if it's a rock solid case, which again is very, very rare because of the way this, again, the standard of care is set up. But like, yeah, if you talk to Anna Vick, one of our, fellow founders at Push, I mean, her son Owen was still alive when she got to the hospital, and he had a heartbeat. He was on the NSTs, and they took forever to deliver him. If they had acted sooner, he probably would have made it. But the hospital just kept making her fill out forms. The doctor that was supposed to be there for delivery, took 45 minutes to arrive. And then she woke up from a crash C-section to learn that Owen had died. This is pretty obvious medical negligence. And she called basically every lawyer in the state of California, and most of them would even return her call or talk to her about it. Finally, one took pity and called back and was just like, listen, the reason you can't get anyone to respond to you is because even if we can prove this case, we get compensated so little, it's literally not worth our time to do so. Yeah, it's horrific. It's horrific. So for a long time, our society has just pushed this off onto parents. And so it leaves people like us wondering, what did I do wrong? My baby was healthy. I was healthy. My doctors did everything they were supposed to do. So what's left? And for me, at least, that calculation resulted in I must have made some kind of terrible mistake. And I'm to blame for this. And that is carrying that kind of soul crushing, just guilt and regret is horrific. And it's something I wouldn't wish on anyone. But it doesn't, that doesn't cost the medical system or the insurance companies or any of these things anything. And so that's where we land right now. Again, was one of our big motivations in starting Push was, we know we can't prevent every stillbirth, but every parent who goes through this and every provider deserves to know that they did everything possible to give that baby the best possible chance. Because, the alternative is all of us walking around with these excruciating what ifs for the rest of our lives. And it's just not fair. It's just really not fair to put that on parents and on doctors when this is a systemic issue that can and should be fixed, and that we now can prove is being addressed effectively in other countries. And so if they can do it, why can't we?
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying, wow, that was an impressive story. A whole different approach that Anne took last week, which is very, very amazing on how insights that I wasn't aware of, how certain elements in the medical system play out. Now, I wanted to ask, you had a very healthy pregnancy. In hindsight, what do you think you would have done differently, or you could do differently? Though it was your first pregnancy and it was uncomplicated until the end, same like ours. We know how we would do it differently by taking EPV and stuff. In your case, with the cord compression or the small cord, what would be your approach?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. And so this is kind of the general advice that I now give to all pregnant people that I know. Number one thing is that to trust yourself. You know your baby and your body better than anyone. And so you have to know going into it that you've got to advocate for yourself as a pregnant person in this medical system, because otherwise you will just get shuffled around and treated like everyone else. And there is no one size fits all in pregnancy, because there is so little focus on educating parents about things like stillbirth risk. Unfortunately, right now the onus very much is on you as a parents to know what you need to look out for. So that's number one. Just know you're normal. Don't hesitate to speak up, and know that is a very good chance that you're going to have to at some point, and that's okay. That's that is that's practice for being a parent. You're gonna have to do this your child's whole life. It starts during pregnancy. So you should not, no one should make you feel bad about advocating for yourself and your child. And that can be very, very hard to do in our medical system. So there's that. And then in terms of like practical stuff, fetal movement education, again, I had no idea. I was explicitly told kick counts were only for high-risk pregnancies. In the UK, they don't even recommend counting. Actually, they just teach you to get to know your baby's patterns, like what times of day are they active, how frequently throughout the day are they typically active, or what kind of stimuli do they respond to, and just again be aware. And it's a great way to get to know your baby. The main thing is just to be aware, to know what's normal for your baby, and to know, most critically, that it's really important that you speak up right away if you notice a change, because that's another big issue with our system, is that even when people notice it, oftentimes their gut instincts aren't trusted, and they're told to, oh, go lay down and drink juice and do a kick count. And it's like, that's not the time to do that. First of all, juice is not a miracle cure that's gonna bring a baby who's experiencing fetal distress back from the brink. Like, when you've noticed something like that, needs to be acted on immediately. So fetal movement education, and knowing that it's critical, that that's the only way your baby really has to communicate with you. But the other thing too that we are always harping on and push is that it shouldn't be up to you as the parents to catch these things, right? Like yes, a lot of babies in distress will show signs through their movement, but like, that is the last red flag that you're getting. And there are things that should have been caught earlier, and that's up to the medical system to be doing. And right now it's hard because, again, it's not part of the standard of care. But if you advocate hard enough for yourself, you can find doctors who will measure your placenta, for example, who will give you a routine third trimester growth scan to make sure that your baby is growing on their same curve. I mean, this is something that drives me nuts. Anyone who brings a child to the pediatrician, right? You know how a growth curve works. There's percentiles, and some children are smaller, some are larger, but in general, what you want to see is that as your child grows, they stay pretty much on their curve. If there's a major change, especially a drop off, that's a red flag and needs to be investigated. For some reason, in obstetrics, that's not how growth charts are used. They basically are just checking, your percentile. And as long as your baby's above the 10th percentile, you're fine. And like, that just literally doesn't make any sense. Like, I've talked to moms who was like, yeah, my baby was on like the 80th percentile. And then, I noticed a change in movement. So they gave me BPP and they checked, and like, they had dropped down to like the 11th percentile. But they told me, oh, as long as your baby's not under 10th percentile, you're fine. And then of course their baby goes on to be born still. And it's just like, hello, like, this literally doesn't make sense. And it's infuriating, because I'm just like, I don't have to be a medical professional to tell you that a baby that drops 70 percentiles off their growth curve is in trouble. The other thing that we always run into is this, well, what are we supposed to do about it? If we have this information that this baby has a small placenta, or they dropped off their curve, but it's too early to deliver, what are we supposed to do? And like, for me, I think the answer there is really obvious. It's like, pay closer attention, admit this mom, put her on a monitor, like, be watching for signs, so that, at the very least, educate her on what to look for. And really, honestly, one of the biggest issues here is just awareness. You don't know that you need to fight to be seen and heard later in your pregnancy if you don't know that this is a possibility that can happen to you, right? The first inclination that we had that something might be wrong with Alana. So I had been in like early labor. It was very irregular, but for about 24 hours. And I labored at home because I knew there's nothing at the hospital they can do for me except, catch a baby or, induce. And I could tell that my body wasn't there yet. And so, I called at it was like 5:00 the next day, and it was like, because I knew my doctor's office would be closing soon. I was just like, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. I've been in early labor for about 24 hours. Probably be coming in tonight or tomorrow morning, depending on how things go. And that was literally the first time that I was asked to like do a kick out. They're like, oh, is it your baby moving? And I was like, you know what? I'm having a hard time telling because I feel like, yeah, I'm feeling movement, but it's like all during contractions. And, and that was the first time the midwife was like, maybe you should just come in now. And I was just like, but why? Like, there's no, like, it seems like everything's fine. And she's like, well, can you at least like do a kick count? And, if you don't feel 10 movements in 2 hours, like come in. And I'm just like, okay, fine. And I, drank some juice. I had strawberry lemonade, just closest thing we had in the house to juice, and laid on my side. And, after 45 minutes, I had felt what I thought was maybe 4 movements, but they were all during contractions. And I was like, okay, like maybe something is wrong. And I was like, okay, I guess we should go in, and I remember walking out of the house, and I glanced at my cat, Geo, and just the look on his face. It was like he knew. I mean, he had spent the entire pregnancy laying on my stomach. He was with me constantly. Like, he knew that his sister was gone, but he didn't have the words to tell me. And frankly, at that point, I didn't have the capacity to hear it. And so, I could see like the panic in his face, and I was just like, oh, don't worry, G, like, we'll be back soon, or grandma and grandpa will be, like, everything's going to be fine. And I sat down in the car, and I just burst into tears. But it wasn't because I had any idea the nightmare I was about to be walking into. I thought I was about to have my worst nightmare, which was an emergency C-section. Like, it never once crossed my mind that my baby would not survive. And I think this is the case for the vast majority of families in this country. Like, unless you know somebody who's been through it, and even then, people don't want to think this can happen to them. Like, again, the stigma is very real. And so there's a lot of, victim blaming that happens, unfortunately. That, again, is one of the things that we have really prioritized, trying to break that down, and break the silence around it, as push and as parent advocates, is that, if this happened to us, it could happen to you the same way. And we don't tell you that to scare you. We tell you so that you are equipped with the information that we wish somebody had given us that might have made a difference for us.
Well, even that statistic you shared earlier about like how common stillbirth is compared to that whole list of things you shared, we were talking about that recently, and how much people talk about SIDS, or at least I feel like it, how much people are aware of SIDS and how scared they are of SIDS happening to their baby. But stillbirth is way more common, but it's not talked about. People just aren't aware. And I feel like that's the first step in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's why what you guys are doing with your racing awareness is critical, because people, they literally don't know. I mean, and this was really reinforced for us. But one of our first activities that we did as push, we did the New York City onesie walk, where we strung up 900 onesies to represent 900 babies born still just in the 5 boroughs of New York City every year, which stretched 2.5 city blocks. And we marched it like 4.5 miles from Central Park down to City Hall. The conversations that we had on the streets of New York just like really reinforced how little is known about this. I always say that the 3 things that stuck out to me, one guy yelled, stillbirth. I thought that only happened in the Middle Ages. And another said, God, that is so sad. I mean, that must only happen to poor people, right? And I was like, oh, no. It happened to us. It happened to us and all the people standing on this line behind me. And he was just like, no, how is that possible? But my favorite though is the one guy who looked up from his phone and was just like, what did the mom do wrong? I mean, this is what people think. And in New York City, they will yell these things at you on the street. So you get to hear what they're thinking. But this is what's happening in most people's heads. It's like they just they just don't know. And I empathize because I was that person. I was that person before this happened to me. It's more than twice as likely to happen to Black moms or Indigenous moms or LGBTQ moms, or parents. Basically, anybody from any type of marginalized background is at least double the risk of stillbirth. The thing about that, which is both infuriating but also encouraging, is that a lot of that comes back to systemic racism, bias, things that we can fix, things that are in our control. So it's nauseating that, there was a recent study, 2024, that showed that, even though Black and Indigenous moms are having stillbirths at twice the rate, most people's assumption is, oh, that's social determinants of health, right? It's like these people don't have access to care, they don't have good nutrition. And so the study looked more closely at that. And what they found was that for Indigenous moms and families, that was true. Almost, I think, like 98% of the disparity in outcomes could be explained by, social drivers. For Black moms, it was only 50%. And so you have to ask, what is that other 50%? And what's really wild is that nobody really makes it explicit anywhere that the other 50% is just straight up racism. Like, it's just racism in our healthcare system, but they don't say it in the study. We watched a wonderful rising star OB present about this study at, Mount Sinai Prenatal Loss Symposium. Me and a couple of the push moms went up afterwards and was just like, are we correct in assuming that the other 50% that's unexplained is actually just like racism? And he's like, yeah, it is. Like, I didn't feel comfortable saying that in this room full of people. So that's one of the reasons, again, that we are so outspoken about racial disparities and about discrimination and about social justice and reproductive justice, is because so much of this comes back to that, and there's literally nobody talking about it. And the thing is that if you prioritize fixing those issues, everything else gets fixed as a result. If we can improve outcomes for those among us who are most at risk, like, that is going to improve outcomes across the board for everybody, right? A rising tide raises all boats. And so we are always trying to, when we talk about, how to improve stillbirth outcomes, focusing first on marginalized families, and not because, anyone's babies count more than others, but just because we know that if we only fix it for people like us, there's going to be a lot of people left behind, and those families are making up the majority of the horrible effects here. If we close the gap between Black and white stillbirth rates, we'd be saving 4,000 lives every year. 4,000 lives just by closing the racial disparity gap.
It's all minutes right there.
Yeah. I mean, and if you look at our average rate of reduction of stillbirth in the past, 20 years, compared to only high income countries, we rank 48th out of 49. And if you broaden that out to all 195 countries in the world that report stillbirth rates, low, middle, and high countries, we rank 183rd. Like, we are not making progress. And I think, again, a lot of people's initial reaction to that is, oh, well, it must be because our rates are so much better than everyone else. It's like, no, we rank last out, compared to the 27 high income countries who had better rates than us to begin with, and are still improving them faster than we are. At least 1 in 4 stillbirths in the U.S. stillbirths, 25% stillbirths in U.S. stillbirths are absolutely preventable given the current tools and technologies we have today, including 47% at term. But that is a massive underestimate, because if we match the rates of our best international peers, we'd be preventing up to 75% of U.S. stillbirths. Like, this does not need to be happening. You would think that those numbers are enough to motivate our our government and our medical system and our public health systems to do something about this, but they haven't been. What has made the difference is our stories, is parents like us talking about our children and had that showing that they could be alive today. I mean, this is why we created our short film, which we were very excited recently won an award from the medical marketing. It's MM&M Awards. We got second prize for use of film, and that's the whole point of it, is to show, it's a 7-minute short film. And as parents who've been through this, like, I'll just fair warning, is extremely traumatizing. It just shows our stories, and it shows how easily it could have gone the other way. And the point of that is to show medical professionals, like, this is within your power to change. Really, the whole thing is based around parent stories, listening to our experiences, understanding like the small tweaks that they can make in their, routines that make a massive difference in outcomes for us, both from a, physical and mental health standpoint. And really the hope of that, because our goal is our mission as Push is to eradicate preventable stillbirth in the United States by 2035, which is an ambitious goal.
I was about to ask, like, yeah, you've brought it up a couple of times that you work for Push. The question that I have, like, what is Push and what are you guys trying to do? Last week we talked to MTP, and what about placentas? This is a whole different story, but also ties into stillbirths. So what is Push?
So obviously our goal is to end preventable stillbirth in the U.S., and we do that through lots of different ways. I adore Measure the Placenta and Anne. They're my favorites. And we've been working super closely with them from the very beginning. I would say the main way that Push is different from MTP or our friends at Count the Kicks is that we are taking a more holistic view, and we are focusing on top-down systems change. So MTP, with the placental measurements, critically important piece of things. Count the Kicks with fetal movement education for parents and providers, critical piece of this. But again, we know from experience that even when you have parents who know what they're talking about and are doing all the right things, if you don't have a medical system that's willing to meet them halfway, there's only so much you can do.
That's been our challenge, is since Ellery's stillbirth and us finding the cause and it being a small placenta, we have tried meeting with our providers to just talk about it and talk about what can be done for the next pregnancy, if we can get the placenta measured, what their thoughts are just in general of her outgrowing her placenta and having a small placenta. But the provider we talked to wasn't even willing to listen to us at all or even discuss it at all.
I think it ties into what Samantha was saying earlier. It's the fear of lawsuits. It's the fear of doing something different than the insurance company tells them to do. And yeah, I think it diminishes the lack of like ambition and like drive to change the system or like do something better for your patient, because you have a breathing dog in your neck that is gonna bite you if you do something different than what they pay you for.
Yeah, and we went into that conversation, at least I did, like, I knew about it almost a system that I went to. I didn't go to a private clinic. So I didn't go in with this expectation of them being like, yay, let's measure your placenta. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to have a conversation about it and learn more, but they weren't even willing to do that. And it's really discouraging.
Yeah, it's really discouraging. Yeah.
But also I wanted or more on the encouraging note is I have been going to OB clinics locally for when he runs his marathons, and I've been bringing information about measuring the placenta and preventable stillbirth. And almost every clinic I go to, they're very interested, or at least they seem to be very interested in it. And then people you talk to about like, oh yeah, measuring the placenta, and they're like, oh, that makes so much sense. And people seem to want to know more and learn more and are interested, but then when it comes down to you as a patient and getting your provider to listen. It doesn't.
It's a different story. And I really think that in addition to the whole, liability standpoint, I really think a big part of it too is the emotional accountability. Like no one wants to think, oh, if I had just given this patient, in a couple ultrasounds in the third trimester and looked at their placenta size, which takes 30 seconds and 3 measurements on any standard 2D ultrasound, this child would be alive, right? Like that is accepting responsibility to some degree for this loss. And like we as parents who have had to shoulder that know how much that hurts, right? And so who's going to willingly do that? And yeah, I mean, it's been wild to us because you would think if someone's giving you tools that could potentially save a child's life, like, of course you want to use them. You want to change your dream, right? But that has not been the experience of almost any of us. I mean, it has been few and far between that the handful of individual providers that we have found who have really embraced stillbirth prevention as something that's doable and worthwhile. The vast majority find excuse after excuse after excuse for why they shouldn't. And even like you said, like, we'll show them something like the placental measurements and they'll be like, oh, this seems really interesting. And they go to learn more. And then they realize that, ACOG is not part of ACOG standard of care. They're like, oh, I can't do that until ACOG tells me I can. And we go to the people at ACOG. So, one of the first things, again, that Push and Mothers of the Placenta did together was start this Hey ACOG campaign where we had 6,500 families across the country send a letter to ACOG leadership, the clinical consensus committee, all of the doctors who are responsible for making the standard of care, their board, their leadership teams and stuff, to say, hey, we have these tools, put the estimated placental volume, which we admit is an emerging tool, and maybe just something to consider during pregnancies after loss, where we know that small placenta was a factor, and something to do more research about. And then we also have Count the Kicks, which is a free app and program, and it's been very successful in Iowa, and now it's in a bunch of other states. And like maybe these should be some standard things that we could be using. And here's a picture of my child who was born still, who was a real person and who was loved and missed and maybe could have been saved by these things.
With your subsequent pregnancies, knowing that Alana's stillbirth was from a cord accident, did they do any monitoring specifically for that?
They did not. So, and I guess I didn't know Mia was already born. Yeah. So I did not have definitive answers until after I was done with my pregnancies, which sucks. What we did have was a actually very thorough and well done placental pathology review, which I later learned actually did have the right information in there, but again, neither I nor my doctors, including my MFMs, had the expertise to understand what it was saying. And this is another kind of big systemic issue. It's placental pathology is one of the few, or perinatal pathology is one of the few areas of medicine where like a doctor orders a test and then they get back the results and they have no idea what it means. And so it's just like, it's totally useless. Like the information was there, but nobody knew how to extract it. So basically I went through my subsequent pregnancies thinking that I had an acute cord accident, that by process of elimination, they couldn't find anything else wrong. So it must have been an acute cord accident, something that last night of her life, like, a cord got kinked or something like that. And then I knew from those results and talking to cord specialists that she had a short, hypocoiled, thin cord that was prone to compression. But again, I just, I spent years torturing myself. Like, what if I had just rolled over that last night? I mean, I literally felt her. I felt her in distress. That last night, I had her 39-week checkup earlier that day. She had anesthesia. She passed with flying colors. The one thing that was weird was that my fundal length measured smaller than the previous weeks. And my OB was like, that's a little bit weird, and like tried a different tape measure, and she's like, well, you know what, let's just put you on the ultrasound just to be safe. But the thing was that, at that point I hadn't had a detailed ultrasound in almost 4 months. The last time I had one was, for her anatomy scan. And so we had no baseline. So like, yeah, we see her on there, she's moving. Like, there's nothing that we can tell is wrong. Had she been being monitored to the same level that my other kids were, and if we had been able to do a growth scan at that point and a placental measurement at that point, what we would have seen is that, even though her placenta continued to grow on its, 80th percentile growth curve, Alana, who had been previously on the same growth curve, had dropped to the 50th. And again, she's not a small baby by any means. I mean, she was born at 6.5 pounds. But those last couple of weeks of the pregnancy, right, that's when your baby's supposed to be packing on the pounds. And generally, your placenta and your baby's fetal growth should mirror each other. And so the fact that the placenta kept growing and she didn't, like, that should have been a red flag that we caught. To give you an idea, again, both my subsequent kids were induced and born at 37.5 weeks. They both weighed 8 pounds. So born 2 weeks earlier than their sister and weigh almost 2 pounds more. In my later pregnancies, what ended up being kind of the deciding factor at the end, because, I had really gone back and forth like about this, should I induce at 37 weeks or not? Again, I was very, very bought into the whole like natural birth thing in my first pregnancy. And then by the end of my second pregnancy, like it was very obvious that like if for nothing else, my mental health and that of my providers and everyone around me, we were going to have a 37-week induction. But again, we didn't have the information to compare to, and so none of that was caught. But yeah, so I went home after that 39-week checkup that day thinking everything is perfect. When I laid down to bed that night, she was active like she always was, but it was weird. Like, it felt weird. I describe it as like waves rolling through my belly. And, and again, I think in retrospect, what that was like a reaction, like a reflex that babies have when they're in distress. And there's been studies where they've seen, like, if you like manually compress the umbilical cord of a fetal sheep or something, like, it will start jerking around because it's a reflex to try to get whatever's going on to stop. And so I laid there for an hour feeling her do this, thinking, oh, this must be Braxton Hicks contractions. Like, I didn't really understand. I knew that I was having them because, again, I'd had the NSTs and you could see that it was happening, but like I hadn't felt anything. And I was just like, oh, this is finally, now she's practicing, she's getting ready. Come. And then finally, after an hour, when the movement stopped, I got out of bed with a big smile on my face. Like, and I blamed myself for that for years because I thought that if I had, rolled over to my side or gotten up to go to the bathroom sooner, that she would be okay. But what I didn't know until many years later was that by that point, the damage was already done. I mean, maybe we could have saved her, but she had been bleeding out for weeks by that point.
But that's what we. I mean, it's been 6 months as of last week since we lost Ellery, and that's the kind of wave in our grief that we've come through as well. It's like we've got through like a phase, I would call it right now. It's like, oh, what could have we done different and this and that. But I keep telling myself, and especially you too, is like, and I'll say the same for you, that in the aftermath, it's pretty easy. It's the same as gambling on a certain soccer match. It's like, oh, in the aftermath, you just on that. But no, because you don't know in the moment itself, so you can't blame yourself and
No.
put up all that negative thought. What I want to say is, like, for the next pregnancy, it is better to measure and to see what's going on instead of just preventatively, oh, let's do 37 weeks, just to be safe. It's like, well, those last 2 weeks, like you said, it's good to beef up the baby and it's good to develop the lungs a little more. And I don't think like inducing early is always a good reason, and definitely consult with your provider. But that's where the research is needed, and especially for placental moments, that's very important. Get a baseline, like you were saying, you didn't have a baseline, like, okay, my baby is this size, placenta, we don't know. And that's, I think, the research that is definitely needed, and also the measurements are needed during the pregnancy. So
It's the awareness again, because we were told after Ellery, oh, you're going to be induced next time.
Yeah, and you're just like, why?
it's wrong with this.
I mean, yeah, you have no idea what's happening in this pregnancy.
Yeah, it's like, well, like, why? And then that was a big reason I wanted to talk to a provider when we found the reason ourselves, because I wanted to know, like, would this change the recommendations for an induction if we were measuring the placenta for another pregnancy and baby and placenta were measuring well? Would you still recommend a 37-week induction, or would you advise to wait to 38 weeks? It's just like, for them, it was just like, yep, you're going to be induced next time. And that was it. It was just, you're going to undergo more monitoring, you'll be induced.
And everything will be just fine. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, so first to go back to what you're saying, it's very normal, the point that you guys are at right now, wondering what you could have done differently and blaming yourselves for it. And the thing you need to remember is that you didn't know what you didn't know, and you did the absolute best you could with the information you had available to you at the time. I mean, that's the only thing that any of us can give ourselves for reassurance, right? And again, this is why we do what we do as Push, because you shouldn't have to wonder that. You should know for sure. You should be able to focus on the grief of missing your daughter rather than wondering, what mistakes you made as a parent. Like, it's not right. And so please know that your feelings are valid and normal, but also they are not based in reality. We all have a 4-page list of the things that we quote unquote did that might have caused this. Again, if we're all making the same quote unquote mistakes, this is not a failure of any one individual parent. This is a system level failure. With the whole like induction and the second pregnancy and stuff, there is no right answer. I mean, that was the hardest part for us, as we got, especially to the end of the pregnancies, and we were really conflicted about what we wanted to do. Like, we just wanted someone to be like, this is the right thing to do. Like, this has the best outcomes, or like, and no one could tell us that. And so it's really hard because no one wants to make the call, and like, you don't want to make the call, and they're like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know, but you're the medical professional. But yeah, there aren't clear answers. And so I think the important thing to take away from that is that, there may not be a right answer, but that also means there's not a wrong answer. And so you've got to go with what is right for you. And again, tell yourself the same thing. I'm doing the best that I can with the information I have at my disposal. And like, I agree 100% that more information is better. If you can get your doctor to do placental measurements, if you can get your insurance to agree to, more regular growth scans, if you want, I know moms who've gotten themselves admitted to the hospital 2 weeks in advance and just stayed there on a monitor because that was what they needed to get through. And yeah, and like, I know moms who have done the 37-week induction, and like my kids, everything was perfect. They came out big, healthy, needed no additional extra care. And I know moms who have chosen not to, and to go to 39 weeks, or to wait till they go into labor naturally, and everything worked fine for them. And I also know moms who made the same choice as me, and then their 10-pound baby ended up in the NICU, and they were just like, I wish I had never done this. So there's no guarantees, and that's what makes all of this so incredibly hard.
Yeah, measure beforehand, so you know what to do.
And that's, again, we're always pushing with the medical system. Like, isn't it better to have more information? Like, we're not saying you have to do something about it, but like, make an informed decision. And if you don't have all the information, how are you risk stratifying properly here for this family and giving an accurate, assessment as to what the options are and what the relative risks are. It's really hard. I mean, and I think that's something again that our society is really doing a disservice to expectant families.
Question actually that I wanted to ask, since you were talking about all these studies that need to be done and all the measurements need to be taken, like if we give you 3 budgets, like we give you 10,000 and then 100,000 and a million. So with those budgets, what would you like to see happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because like many people don't realize this. All of us at Push still are volunteers. Like our overhead is very, very little. And the vast majority of the work that we are doing does not cost anything to execute other than our time, which yes, we all deserve to be compensated for, but the money hasn't been there. And for us as parents, we care more about this mission than anything. And so we've been lucky enough to find ways to make it work, even though most of us are also carrying, careers and full-time jobs or full-time caregivers at home, that kind of thing. And so we're able to do a lot with a little. It's like social media awareness raising does not cost very much if you learn how to do it effectively. Even staging, awareness demonstrations, going up to the state capitol or to DC to, do legislative advocacy. We have been able to make a lot of progress with very little. If we had money, it would certainly make things easy. The main thing for us is that if we had consistent funding, we could all leave our jobs and do this full time. And, imagine, look at what we've been able to achieve squeezing it in our abundant free time. We could be making so much more progress, so much faster if this could be our full-time job.
The full-time job to work for Push, what would be one of the first things you would be able to accomplish, you think?
I think so. Like right now, for example, one of the things that we are focusing on right now is trying to get our accredited training for stillbirth prevention and pregnancy after loss in the hands of as many providers as possible. Again, because we want this to be a culture change type thing. And so we're going to a lot of conferences, which are very expensive, and just trying to meet people and make connections and network and, find the right gatekeepers with the right access to help spread this knowledge on a large scale. We could be doing, if we had massive sums of money, we could be doing a national awareness campaign. I mean, in other countries, like Australia has an entire arm. It was very interesting when I started Push. One of the first people I spoke to was Dr. Vicky Flannery in Australia, and she is the head of the Stillbirth Center for Research Excellence. And basically, what happened in Australia was parents like us went to the government and said, this would happen to us. And they were like, that's horrible. We need to do something about this. And so they have nationalized medicine. So they turned to their medical side of their government, was just like, you need to do something about this. And, that's when they came up with their, stillbirth prevention bundle. And so Vicky was, mostly one of the main people in charge of kind of that whole clinical aspect of it. But then there was this whole other aspect of it that it was a public awareness campaign, and it was called Still 6 Lives, and it was created by this org called Red Nose Australia. And so it was so funny as I'm talking to Vicky, and I'm just like, yeah, so we as Push, as a volunteer organization of bereaved parents, are basically doing all of that. All the things that you had government funding and specific, we're just trying to figure that all out on our own here. And she's just like, good luck with that, But it's true. I mean, we have had to, because of, like you were saying, our medical system is so disjointed, and, state health departments have their own things that they do. They have their own budgets. They have a lot of, freedom when it comes to what kind of things they want to promote and what they don't. It is very, very hard to get top-down systems change that's really going to affect every pregnancy. And so that's where we are doing things like, legislation and, campaigns like the Hey ACOG letter campaign to try to get, in front of ACOG leaders. And, we did this whole thing with the NIH where they had a stillbirth working group, and they were initially focusing, in our opinions, on all the wrong things. And so we had to really work hard to kind of get them to listen to parents. And when they did, they were like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, we should change course the way we're doing this. And they have, and it's been amazing. But that was an effort that we went through in December. So it's one of the griefiest seasons of the year. And, many of us have small kids, so we're exhausted to begin with. And, we are spending every free moment that we can, outside of our jobs and outside of our families, reaching out to other bereaved parents and trying to organize a agenda of, who's going to be speaking about what aspect of their personal story and of the larger systemic issues, in order to make it clear to this, panel of powerful people in our public health system that, it's not just about obesity and drug use, that this is happening in healthy low-risk pregnancies, and we're falling through the cracks. And these are the different things that can be done. And if we had funding, we would, have people that this is what we do for 40 hours a week, and we could just do a lot more of it. And, and if we had large funding, we could, like Red Nose Australia did, do a large public awareness campaign where we have, subway ads and billboards and TV commercials and, other creative ways that we're reaching out to people. We've done some of that. We had a really wonderful support from Earth Mama Organics, and they funded us to make a stillbirth awareness PSA. And then they helped us to make that reach people on social media using actual social media ads. And yeah, I think last time I checked, it was up to 5 million views or something like that. We've been able to do stuff like that, but we would love to be able to be doing so much more. Yeah, unfortunately, advertising, commercial slots, that all costs a lot of money. But in the meantime, again, we didn't PR. We get a lot of earned media, and which has been huge. We hired a professional PR team that has been incredible. And, their data shows that we are reaching 768 million people last year through just being on various news sources and stuff.
So it all comes down to mostly just awareness, knowing that you guys are around, knowing what you guys are doing, and making people aware that stillbirths are preventable. Is there any academic study, is there any research that you think might be beneficial in the short term?
I mean, absolutely. Again, that's not something that we as push focus on as much, but again, Measure the Placenta is always pushing to try to get a large scale, study done with estimated placental volume. There's a big gap there because we have lots of data showing that the EPV, method works reliably in terms of estimating the size of the placenta. And we have lots of research showing that, extremes of placental size are associated with adverse outcomes in pregnancy, including stillbirth. But we don't have the big bridging gap there. And again, because of the ethical and logistical concerns, it's been really hard to get a clear picture from, even for example, ACOG. We've said we have parents who are willing to fund the study. What is the study that you need to see in order for this to be something that you consider?
Right.
We can't seem to get a straight answer out of that. They love to talk about evidence-based, blah, blah, blah. There's no evidence backing up our entire protocol for pregnancy in the United States. Literally, I mean, I sat at a session in ACOG where they're talking about, the new one they're going to be rolling out, which is even worse. But they're basically just yeah, this is how they started doing it in the 20s. And they just said, well, this is how it's done. And that's what we've continued to do for the last 100 years with very little changes because we don't have the evidence. We don't have the evidence. And a lot of times when it comes to pregnancy, you can't get the evidence that you want to see because it's not ethical. it's not ethical to do randomized controlled trials on, currently pregnant people when you suspect that one of these things is going to have better outcomes than the others, right? Like you have to, everything is done retrospectively, everything's observational. Like you just don't have the same level of confidence in the science that you can get with other types of conditions and stuff. And also just the numbers are too big. Like something like stillbirth, which is happening, less than 1% of the time, like you need hundreds of thousands of cases in your study in order to have statistical significance. And there is just practical barriers to making that happen. In Australia, like they did large scale studies at, pilot health systems where they were implementing these stillbirth prevention guidelines through their bundles, the Saving Baby bundle and the Saving Babies Lives care bundle. And like, this is a pretty massive undertaking because you need to train the entire, hospitals and, all the OB offices staff about like where we're going to do changing things. And then they have to do it effectively and like document the outcomes and everything. And they were able to do that and show, improved outcomes. But we haven't been able to undertake anything like that in the US. And there's been a couple of times that we've come close to starting something and then it hasn't materialized. So in terms of research, like that's the main things. Again, it's not that we don't have the tools, it's that we're not using them. And there's lots of excuses for why that is. And so the research that we need is to prove that the tools are effective and that they don't have unintended consequences or risks or costs, and to show that it can be done. Because I think that's the biggest hurdle we face right now is that our medical and public health system does not think that it can be done, no matter how much data we throw at them from other countries. And so we need US-based stuff. And we, again, have seen some big changes there in recent years. Again, the NIH this fall announced $37 million for a stillbirth research center across, 5 universities in the US. I mean, that's huge. Nothing like that has ever been done here. And that's a direct result of efforts of parents like us. I mean, your stories, I mean, what I'm always trying to stress to parents, fellow stillbirth parents, is that our stories are powerful. And, there's nothing special about me and, the rest of the push team and the measurable percent. Like everyone, our community is filled with smart, caring, ambitious, talented people. And we all have a different piece of the puzzle to bring. And it's really just knowing that it's worth doing. The only change that we have seen happen is because people like us who are just everyday moms and dads who are just pissed off and sick of watching other families go through it have spoken up, and we are speaking up in a way that, we refuse to be ignored. And it really does make a difference. It really does make a difference. And so I applaud you guys for doing what you're doing with this podcast and with, the racing. I think as a stillbirth parent, right, that I've always said, if we can save one baby, we can save one family, the heartache that we have all been through, like, this is all worth it. It's worth it for one.
What about for someone listening, whether they've had a stillbirth or not, if they're interested in helping or supporting push, what is something that they could do?
We always say the simplest thing, like, comment, share. We're active on social media platforms, and the algorithm needs engagement in order to reach more people. And we know that awareness is the first step. So it costs nothing. But if you can like, comment, and share on our posts, that is always extremely helpful. Next step, if you have the ability to donate, whether funds or time or expertise or connections, again, we're bootstrapping. We take whatever we can get and we put it all to very good use. So you can donate, at any of our social media pages at pushpregnancy.org. Also, if you have a good relationship with your healthcare providers or anybody in a hospital system, that kind of thing, that we can get our training in front of them, that would be huge. And we're happy to give discounted codes and things like that. If you have if your OB is like, okay, I will check that out and see if maybe it's something worth doing, like, we're happy to hook you up with that. Just trying to get the knowledge out there however we can. So
What about somebody in the insurance business? Is there anything there that we can ask?
Actually, so we just came back from a Medicaid conference where that was kind of our goal, was to meet people in insurance, because apparently many insurance companies end up getting federal funding from Medicaid to implement programs at the state level. And sometimes that money goes towards accredited training that can help improve outcomes in various areas. And so maternal health is a big focus right now. One of the things that we're working on is to try to really capture the economic costs of stillbirth. That's something that we really haven't done extensively in the United States. And unfortunately, that is one of the biggest drivers of change in this country. So we are in the process right now of basically trying to make a compelling case. I mean, we know that it's true, but we don't have the numbers to back it up, that averting stillbirths is good for insurance companies' pockets.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're trying to figure out, either on a federal or state level, how much it costs to stillbirth prevention. Is that what I'm getting at?
Well, it's more, because we know the stillbirth prevention costs very, very little. It's more, how much does it cost when you don't prevent stillbirth? And what is the ongoing? So, like, for example, obviously you have all this money that an insurance company has invested in what's supposed to be the birth of a child, and then you're not getting your return on your investment there, number one. And then there's all this additional costs that we know, the additional testing and stuff like that's required. Like genetic testing be like $25,000. It's not cheap. And then you have a family who's going to need mental health care, trauma-informed care for the rest of their lives. That is not cheap. And then now subsequent pregnancies are all automatically bumped into high risk. And we know that those cost insurance companies more money. And then there's also like the larger, like, kind of like societal view. I mean, think of how many families who, didn't go back to work. Like, the mom had a thriving career and then, went through this and was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, that is a cost to society. Think about, dads going back to work 2 weeks after a stillbirth and like sitting at their desk in a daze and not being able to do what they're supposed to do. We are paying for this on a massive scale. I mean, I always tell a story. One of my cousins, when he found out that Alana, was going to be born still, I think the next day he was at work. He went to work and then somebody sent an email like announcing the birth of their baby. And he was just hysterical. He had to go home. They sent him home from work. And like, this is not the parent. Like, this is the cousin of the parent. And he still got paid for that day, even though he got no work done. There are very real economic costs associated with stillbirth, and it's something that our insurance companies and our government is not taking into account. And so we're trying to make that very tangible in an effort to incentivize them to do something about it.
To put it boldly for a governmental level, if you have 65,000 taxpayers left, that will make a cut in your budget.
Exactly.
I mean, saving 65,000 lives, just on an economic level, you need to buy stuff for your baby. You need to just to put that in numbers,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been over 20,000 stillbirths every year for decades. I mean, think about the number of people walking around who have been touched by this and how that's affected them. It's massive. And then of course we have all of these babies who never got to grow up and reach their potential.
I did want to ask, this is kind of going back a little bit, but you had just a little bit touched on like how even a cousin is affected by the stillbirth. But for you in particular, Alana was your first child. Larry was also our first child. So I think one thing, at least that I've struggled with, is our life has essentially gone back to what it was before, even though doesn't feel that way.
Physically, there's the mentally.
Yeah. So what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean that was one of the worst parts about it, because it's just like your entire life has been turned upside down, and then you're just, 2 days later deposited right back where you were, but nothing is the same. And like everyone around you, expects after some amount of time that you'll just go back to doing things the way you were, and it's just like you can't. You're not the same person anymore. The trauma and the grief is so much worse than I think people realize, and in many ways there's this conception that the day that you deliver your baby is the worst day, and it's just going to get better from there. I mean, in many ways it's the opposite. I mean, that's the only day that you get to be with your child, and then you have to face every day for the rest of your life without them. And you're in shock when you come home from the hospital, and especially when it's like your first child. Like you don't really know what it is that you've missed out on in many cases. And so what we find, especially for those of us in this situation, is that it's many times not until you have your next child, like parents have a huge grief relapse, because you're finally experiencing all the things you should have experienced with your first, and everyone thinks that you're good now, right? Like, oh, you have a living baby in your arms, everything's fine. And it's just like, it's so not mine. So not mine. It's just so triggering, right? Like, we got a second car because I used to drive my husband to the train and pick him up every day. And, we knew with a baby that was gonna not be fun to do. So we got a second car. And so for the next, year, I had to look at the second car in my driveway every day and think, well, I really don't need that, do I? I always tell the story. Right before we left for the hospital, I had this weird feeling, like a week before Alana was born, that I just really hated all of her clothes. And so I went on this shopping spree to buy some things that I really liked, because I wanted stuff to bring her home from the hospital and that I liked, instead of stuff that other people had bought for us. And a lot of it didn't show up until literally that day I was in labor at home, and it was all hand wash and needed to air dry. So I was like, okay, fine, I won't bring her home from the hospital and this stuff, but I'll have it for newborn photos when we get back. And so we walk in from delivering her still, and driving home with a brand new car seat rattling empty in the back, to a drying rack full of tiny clothes that she'll never wear. I buried her in some of those clothes. And I don't know, it's just, the reminders are everywhere. You go to your mailbox and it's just ad for baby thing. At the 6 months, I was getting all these postcards oh, it's time for your 6 months photos, how and I'm just come on, you just can't get away from it. And yeah, and it's just crazy. People, my husband was saying, there was a year later, there were people at work, it'd be oh, I that he worked on with a project and hadn't seen. They're oh yeah, you were pregnant last time I talked to you. How was your baby? And you have to tell them, oh, I'm sorry, and then you're trying to take care of the other person, right? I mean, yeah, I was at my mailbox a year later, and I had a random neighbor come by and be oh, how's the baby? I'm baby died.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks. Nothing is the same. Nothing is the same afterwards. And really the only people that get that are other parents that are going through it. So that's always the advice that I give to newly bereaved parents. Find other parents to talk to. Find some that are on the same timeline as you, some that are a little bit ahead and can give you an idea what's coming and give you hope that you'll survive it. Because Many days it doesn't feel like you will or that you even want to, even if you could. But we've all been through it. We've all been there, and you're not alone. And it can feel very isolating. It can feel very much like you are alone if you stay in your own bubble. But the more that you connect with other parents who have been through it and are going through it, you know, you see that for so many of us, the experience is very much the same, and it's incredibly validating, and it's necessary.
Last time with Dr. Anne, and it was her fourth child. And in your case, it was your first. So going to your second, and then I guess your third as well. With Anne, it was like all or son, brother, sister. For you, it was like you also have a sister, so it's like a different perspective.
It's a different perspective. Yeah.
So how do you go through the new pregnancy, and how do you, I guess, tell your subsequent kids?
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that I was really worried about throughout. I mean, I read like every piece of research ever written on like subsequent babies, rainbow babies, and I was just like, how is this not going to just ruin my entire family and this be a shadow that's, over any bit of joy we could find. And, the more I learned from reading that, and which I can tell you now from experience, my living kids are 11 and 7. The one advantage, if I think it's an advantage to having losing your first, is that for your subsequent kids, like if you just talk about this, like, if it's just part of your life, like it's just part of your life for them. Like it's not traumatizing or weird or scary to them the same way that it is when, for example, years ago, like this would be a skeleton in the closet, right? Then you'd find out when you're 30 years old that you had an older sibling, and it's like and you're re-evaluating all the ways that like, your parent, like treated you, and you're like, oh, is this because, but for us, we've just been really open about it from the very beginning. There's so many good children's books these days for siblings that either, were alive for the loss of their sibling or came afterwards. One of the big advantages that we have found in terms of like being when we started Push is just that we know so many other families now that, again, for our kids, it's like totally normal. Like they know other kids who also have a dead sibling, and like that's not anything for them to be ashamed of or to be weird about. Having a community is so critically important. And because of the work that we do, like we talk about Alana all the time. We talk about Stillbirth all the time. Like at one point in my life, after the loss, I would have been like, I don't want this to define my entire life. This is not what I don't want to walk around being, the dead baby lady for the rest of my life. Not really how I had envisioned motherhood. Yes, it can be really hard when you're in situations with like, normal people, but because of the work that I do, I get to spend a lot of time with other families that are like ours, and our kids get to spend a lot of time with other families that are like ours. One of the hardest things for me after she died was just like feeling like she was going to be forgotten, and that she wouldn't be part of our family, and she would never be here with us the way that we wanted. And of course, she's not, but she's here with us. I mean, there's evidence of her impact on our lives, of the love that we have for her, even her younger siblings who never met her, everywhere in our lives.
Do you think it changed the way that you parented to your subsequent kids?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a lot more anxious than I
Oh,
probably was going to be. But also at the same time, it's this weird dichotomy because on the one hand, like you don't have that, like, and this was very obvious during COVID. Like it was so interesting because those of us who'd been through a stillbirth in some ways were coping way better than others because that whole, false sense of security that, terrible things can't happen to me. We don't have that, right? And so everyone around us was having this stripped from them in real time. And we're just like, oh, hi, welcome to our world. Like, this is what it's like for us all the time, like death is around every corner. But at the same time, you know, it gives you a confidence in your parenting, you know, like advocating and through two subsequent pregnancies, advocating for ourselves in the healthcare system and our kids in the school system or whatever. Like, it's just second nature now because it's what you got to do, and you know what the consequences can be if you don't. And so, you know, the stuff that would give other people pause or like, worry when people are thinking about them, or whatever. Like for us as lost parents, we generally, you know, it's easier, it's harder earlier on. But as time goes on, you're just like, no, no, I'm not doing that. Like that's not going to work for our family. And you can do that with confidence because you know what happens when you don't trust your own instincts. So,
Well, before we wrap up, one last question. So if there is a parent who has experienced a loss, a stillbirth, what is one thing you would hope they take away from your story and the impact you're making?
I would say I want you to take away that your child will always be an important part of your family. Your relationship with them is not over. And one of the ways that you could further that relationship is just simply by talking about your baby and your story and knowing that that will change lives. And you don't know who you will touch, you know, who will advocate for their own child because they've heard their story, who will feel less alone when it happens to them, who will know where to go for support when it happens to someone they love. Like, this is how we get to parent our kids. It's not the way any of us envisioned or asked for, but it's still a very valid, meaningful, and important way to be a parent. Yeah, it sucks, but embrace it because you're not alone and your baby matters. Your baby matters and they will always matter.
Well, thank you so much for being here today with us and sharing your story and all the work that you're doing within Push. It's really, truly inspiring. We appreciate it.
Thank you. No, thank you, God. I'm inspired by what you're doing. I mean, yeah, it's been incredibly gratifying over the last several years to just meet so many families who are doing so much, and particularly who are doing so much so early. I mean, like, I was catatonic at your at your point. This is 6 months, right? Like, it took me years before I could do anything. And, you know, I give a lot of credit to the community and just, you know, to you guys for reaching out, to you guys for already creating resources for other parents. I mean, again, it's a testament to the impact that all of our babies' lives have. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'm so jealous of your kitty headbutting you over there.
Wow, that was very interesting. That was a lot of information and a lot of stuff still to do to prevent stillbirth preventable stillbirth. To prevent stillbirth, yeah. To prevent preventable stillbirth. Prevent preventable stillbirth by 2035. Yeah, and we thank Samantha for being on the podcast. Thanking you for listening until now.
If you're interested in learning more about postpartum pregnancy or finding ways to get involved, you can check out the information in the links below.
If you want to stay tuned for our next marathon, that will be the Asheville, North Carolina marathon. You can find it online. We can put a link down below as well. If you're a runner, reach out and we can maybe cross the finish line together. And if you're going to be on the sidelines, for Ellery is the hashtag.
The marathon is March 21st. You'll be updated a few days prior to that, so make sure you stay tuned to our channel, follow along, join our community. Next podcast episode comes out next month and features guest Liz O'Donnell, who is the founder and CEO of Alita in Action and the Director of Education for Push for Empowered Pregnancy. So make sure stay tuned for that.
Awesome. See you next time.
Great.
Done.